It's Sunday. Welcome back to Far From Eden. It's the day we read fairy tales until we run out of Grimm Brothers fairy tales and start Hans Christian Andersen or throw in a Rudyard Kipling poem. Who knows? Something like that. We've got to delve into the past sometimes to realize that we used to know some of this stuff. The stuff that Home Math talks about, the stuff that Man Reacts shows on his channel, Better Bachelor, all these guys, like we used to have all this stuff sorted out. It used to not be complicated, with all of Home Math's, charts and categories and everything. We didn't used to need all that because we used to know men are men, women are women, and we know what our roles are, and we stayed in our lanes, and it worked. Life wasn't perfect, but it worked. Anyway, we've been just on a whim one time. I was like, let's see how, brutal one of these fairy tales actually is. And I feel like I uncovered all this truth, and it's sort of another rabbit hole in a way, but I love finding rabbit holes because you find nuggets of truth in there, and you can't go wrong with that. So once again, I just never know which one to pick, which fairy tale to pick. So I just did a Google search, kind of like, what are some of the, strong female characters in Grimm Brothers fairy tales? Let's see what woke Google is going to send to me without me knowing what the story is. That's tricky because I don't want to know. I want to find out with you guys when we do the premiere. So today, oh my gosh, it was so funny. I Googled it and it had all this basically like, well, Grimm Brothers has all these damsels in distress, but they also have these strong female characters. And I was like, do they? That's interesting. So one of these strong female characters is apparently in one called the Idle Spinner. It's also known as the Lazy Spinner. Guess what? It's not in my book. It's not in my book from the early 20th century. As much as I love this book, I love how old it is, I love the fairy tales that are in it and the endings that are not very Disney. And it just shows you, how far left everything has become so that the whole narrative and the way that we think would be different. But the first publication was in 1812. Think about that, 1812. This country was like so new. But anyway, the first one was 1812. So of course, the Lazy Spinner isn't in here. Every time it's not in here, I think, oh, then I want to see what they don't want me to see. I want to know what they don't want me to know, and I want to think about the things that they don't want me to think about. And we know mainstream media is spinning a tale of their own, and that's the idea that control the populace. The truth is in our old stories. Anyway, so of course had to find it on the internet, which is scary because you never know what they could have changed on the internet. So hard copies are always the best. Very excited to get The Manipulated Man. It's coming on Wednesday. Just did a video about it yesterday. Oh my gosh, it was so great to learn all about it, and I cannot wait to get the book. I kind of want to cover it on the channel, but I'm going to reach out to the publishers and see if they're cool with that. It really would be fair use because I will be responding to it and reacting to it. And I'll probably do it on locals or something because YouTube does not care for Esther Vilar. Also, Amazon does not even carry that book, which is super suspect, but it made me think of it about wanting to read the things that they don't want me to read, or any of us. This is stuff they want to hide from us. Why? Why would they? Exactly. Okay, so this is from 1812. As most of you know, Jacob Ludwig Grimm and Wilhelm Karl Grimm are the brothers Grimm, and they traveled through Europe gathering these stories, these tales, this folklore. They found it important enough that they needed to gather these stories and write them down and preserve them. That's interesting. They were like, we better not lose these truths. We better continue to teach people these things. We better hold on to it because this is who we are. Wouldn't that be nice? So the Brothers Grimm lived in the late 1700s and into the 1800s. Jacob Grimm lived from 1785 to 1863, and Wilhelm lived from 1786 to 1859. Okay, the lazy spinner. Lazy spinner. In a certain village, there once lived a man and his wife. The wife was so idle that she would never work at anything. Whatever her husband gave her to spin, she did not get done. And what she did spin, she did not wind, but let it all remain entangled in a heap. If the man scolded her, she was always ready with her tongue and said, "Well, how should I wind it when I have no reel? Just you go into the forest and get me one." "If that is all," said the man, "then I will go into the forest and get some wood for making reels." Then the woman was afraid that if he had the wood, he would make her a reel of it, and she would have to wind her yarn off and then begin to spin again. She bethought herself a little, and then a lucky idea occurred to her, and she secretly followed the man into the forest. And when he had climbed into a tree to choose and cut the wood, she crept into the thicket below, where he could not see her, and cried, "He who cuts wood for reels shall die, and he who winds shall perish." The man listened, laid down his axe for a moment, and began to consider what that could mean. "Hollo," he said at last, Hollo. What can that have been? What can that have been? My ears must have been singing. I won't alarm myself for nothing." So he again seized the axe and began to hew. Then again, there came a cry from below. Okay, so she's lazy. She's making excuses. She's ordering him what to do. And now she's being sneaky, following him and trying to get him to not do the thing. Wow, she's a real winner. These are not good character traits. And I like that they call it out. You know, he scolded her. She's being lazy. They're not saying he's a bad guy. It's totally appropriate for him to scold her. She's having soft life. This woman wants soft life in this Grimm fairy tale. And it's frowned upon, clearly. It's not good to be lazy. Remember once upon a time when being lazy was a character flaw? If somebody called me late, actually, it's happened fairly recently. I can't stand it. It is a bad thing to be. You know, when you're a good Protestant girl, you don't want to be known as lazy. Anyway, I digress. I'm not saying anything bad about Catholics. I'm just making a joke about, the Puritans and the part of that culture that it was like, working is a means unto itself, that kind of a thing. So this lady is lazy, and it's not okay. And she's more than just lazy. So she's still in the tree trying to get him to stop. He who cuts wood for reals shall die, and he who winds shall perish. He stopped and felt afraid and alarmed and pondered over the circumstance. But when a few moments had passed, he took heart again, and a third time he stretched out his hand for the axe and began to cut. But someone called out a third time and said loudly, "He who cuts wood for reals shall die, and he who winds shall perish." That was enough for him, and all inclination had departed from him, so he hastily descended the tree and set out on his way home. The woman ran as fast as she could by byways so as to get home first. So when he entered the parlor, she put on an innocent look as if nothing had happened and said, "Well, have you brought a nice piece of wood for reals?" "No," said he, "I see very well that the winding won't do," and told her what had happened to him in the forest. And from that time forth, he left her in peace about it. So she gets this soft life. Nevertheless, after some time, the man again began to complain of the disorder in the house. "Wife," said he, "it is really a shame that the spun yarn should lie there all entangled." "I'll tell you what," said she, "as we still don't come by any reel, go you up into the loft, and I will stand down below, and will throw the yarn up to you, and you will throw it down to me. And so we shall get a skein after all." That's a different word for me. Skein. I know we have some linguists in the chat, so you guys can enlighten me on that word. She uses it as "we will get a skein after all." It's probably skein if it's German. "Yes, that will do," said the man. So they did that. And when it was done, he said, "The yarn is in skeins. Now it must be boiled." The woman was again distressed. She said, "Certainly, yes, we will boil it tomorrow morning early," but she was secretly contriving another trick. So she's running the show. This household is gynocentric, right? She's totally running the show. She doesn't want to wind the yarn. She gets him to not, make the reel so she doesn't have to wind it. She gets out of work. She gets soft life. And then she's telling him, all right, to shut him up, we'll sort of pass it back and forth. We'll wind it like that. Like, she could have figured that out some other way, wind it, wrap it around something. She's just lazy. She's lazy, and she has to be in control. She has to be in charge. That's a real problem. And why is he obeying her? Why isn't he putting his foot down? Don't know. Kindness, symbology. All right, heading towards the end now. Early in the morning, she got up, lighted a fire, and put the kettle on. Only instead of the yarn, she put in a lump of tow and let it boil. After that, she went to the man who was still lying in bed and said to him, "I must just go out. You must get up and look after the yarn, which is in the kettle on the fire. But you must be at hand at once. Mind that, for if the cock should happen to crow and you are not attending to the yarn, it will become tow." The man was willing and took good care not to loiter. He got up as quickly as he could and went into the kitchen. But when he reached the kettle and peeped in, he saw to his horror nothing but a lump of tow. I hope that's how it's pronounced. I think it's fat, T-O-W, tow. Then the poor man was as still as a mouse, thinking he had neglected it and was to blame, and in future said no more about yarn and spinning, but you yourself must own she was an odious woman. But you yourself must own she was an odious woman. How is this a hero woman? How is this not okay? So they don't want this included in my 20th century book because they don't want women to be called out. That's why this particular fairy tale is hidden. There are no witches, there are no, interesting tales. Here's a wife, and she was awful because she was lazy. She was a liar. She wanted soft life. She wanted the husband to blame himself. Well, she cooked up a scheme. And the end sentence is, but you yourself must own. So telling the reader, you must own it. You must take from this that this is an odious woman. Calls him the poor man was still as a mouse, thinking he had neglected it. There are always these women in these TikTok videos always talking about know your worth, know your value. If he doesn't know your value and he doesn't know your worth, what I see a lot of is men not knowing their value, men not knowing their worth. For example, this man, how is this woman enriching his life at all? What is she doing? Does he need her for anything? Didn't sound like they had children. So if she's not doing that, what is the point of her? That sounds awful. Obviously, there's a point. She's just not doing it. And so if you don't want to, if you are going to join a sports team, right? You're going to join a baseball team and you can't catch and you can't hit, or maybe you can and you just don't. What's the point of being on the team? Except that, you want to be clapped for, maybe like the uniform. You want all the benefits of being on the team, but you're not actually doing anything on the team. The team is not benefiting from having you on it. In fact, they'd benefit a lot more if they replaced you with someone who actually caught the ball and hit the ball and all of that kind of stuff. And that's how I think the men feel about a marriage. If you're not going to do the thing, if you're not going to be a wife, then why are you even on the team? Except to benefit from it. And that's not what the team's about. This woman is a warning. It's a warning, but it's also a condemnation. It's a condemnation of laziness, of dishonesty, of trickery, of all of that. It's a condemnation of just soft life, because this man, he got up, he went in the woods, he used the axe. I'm sure he, hunted and did all those things. I'm sure he built the shelter that they're in. I don't think she built it. He did all of his things. This is exactly what men are dealing with right now. There's a bunch of these women. This woman is a modern woman in 1812. Well, the story was written down then. So what did they actually do with wives like that back then? Well, a lot of times it would be like, bye, you're defective. Go back to daddy. Or, later on, I know it was like, go to the nut house. You just can't have that. You can't tolerate that this poor man did. And I think what a great thing it would be to read children stories like this. Imagine if when we were young, if we'd actually read these stories as they were written down in 1812. And the little girls would read this and think, I don't want to be an odious woman. I don't want to be like that. Oh, that's awful. She's terrible. I don't want to be like that. I want to be like Cinderella, who was pious and good, hard worker. you know, I don't want to be like this odious woman. If we could read that as little girls and be taught laziness is bad, lying is bad, all this stuff because it's wrong, not because of, oh, it's unethical or whatever. No, it's wrong. Don't do it. Really teach the golden rule and think, I don't want to be an odious woman. These women who want to do soft life and have the man be traditional, but them maybe just wear like traditional costume or just look traditional, but not actually do the work. And by traditional, I don't mean soft life traditional. I mean before, before all that soft life, before that became more accepted. And when women were in the garden, raising chickens. I realize this is not city life, but most cities are pretty new. Cities are a result of industrialization, which Grimm Brothers are pre-industrialization. And that's where you find a lot of the truth. That's actually before things went off. And I know, Uncle Ted, he was right. I'm starting to wonder if he actually did any kind of kabooms or not. I don't know, but that's a different story altogether. That's a different tale. But oh my gosh, thank you guys. I love Fairy Tale Day with you guys. And I love that you love them. It doesn't, I mean, they don't get the most amount of views, the most amount of likes. That's okay. It's fine because I know that there's enough of you that appreciate them and I really like them. Sunday is, I don't know, Sunday has its own feeling. Sunday is, I feel relaxed on Sunday, even though, it's not like I'm working hard, toiling away, but there's just something about Sunday that's peaceful. And I think now that we've sort of started this tradition of, fairy tales and things like that on Sunday, which I don't think we'll ever run out of. There's plenty of culture to reach back into. And if I have to pull out the good book and start reading scripture, well, we'll do that too. And I'm always open to anything that you guys want to submit to me. That's really helpful. But I like our tradition on Sundays of getting together and looking at these fairy tales. And I appreciate you guys so much. I hope that you have protected your peace today. I hope that you have found something that feeds your soul. Reading this with you guys, and then later in the chat, feeds my soul. I hope that you remember that you're made in the image of God. And that either reason you know what's wrong and know what's right, like deep down, you just know it. He wrote that on your heart. He wrote that on your heart. And he will not abandon you and he will not forsake you. Bad stuff's going to happen in this life because, something happened in the garden a while ago and everything's just kind of gone downhill. That scared me. My computer made a sound. It scared me. Anyway, things have gone downhill since then. But in the end, it's all made right. It's all made right. So, love you guys. And I'm going to see you guys on the next one. Night.